Remember our Lord's teaching. Be as gentle as doves, but as cunning as serpents. I'm for that. I'm for that. And from the way I've seen a lot of the politicians, I don't know Chicago's politics anymore, but from what I see in other places, it's not too hard to be more cunning than they are. I don't know if you heard that one of the guys who designed the health care bill was videotaped, and now it's on the internet, where he's at a meeting with college people, and he's saying, yes, we had to lie to the people. Now you can say it's because of the stupidity of the voters. He says that word, because of the stupidity of the voters. But we had to hide, because if we told them what was in it, they never would have voted for it. You know, you're right. And so we can be more cunning than people like that who videotape themselves telling us that they're lying. And then we respond more cleverly than they do. All right, we have an email here. Hello, Father Mitch. You recently cited Fides at Ratio number 95, saying correctly that God's truth is unchanging. But the translation of his truth has changed. St. Jerome's Vulgate became the official Bible in the Western Church and was used for all doctrinal discussions. Yet his translations were not as accurate in reflecting the original languages as they could have been. For example, in Luke 1:28, Hail Mary, full of grace, would be accurately expressed as favored one, hail, favored one. And just as you illustrated happening with the mid-synod report, misinterpretation results in misunderstanding. When they did that report at the synod, one of the things that somebody translated an Italian verb as we need to value the gifts of homosexuals, where it said in Italian, we need to evaluate. There's a different nuance. Press like the first one. So the Council of Trent reaffirmed the authenticity of the Vulgate and forbade anyone from interpreting the Holy Scriptures differently. Yet even today, even Roman Catholic hermeneutics recognize the Vulgate's errors. Is it not just as possible to preserve error as it is truth? Howard in Belcamp, Maryland. Well, first of all, Howard, you give one example of translating the Greek word kecharitomeni in Luke 1:28 as the one who has been favored. That's what that would be a literal English interpretation of it. However, that doesn't mean that St. Jerome mistranslated or falsely translated it. One of the ways in which you can see that is when you also read the Syriac translation, it also says, Hail Mary, full of grace. And so does a later medieval Hebrew translation. Why did they do that? Because they were following St. Jerome? No. It's because they were dealing with an idiom. The Greek language at the time of St. Jerome and of the translation of the Syriac was the common language of the empire in the East. He spoke it. He learned it as a second language, but and then he also learned Hebrew as a third language and Aramaic as a fourth. And, so he learned Greek from people whose first language was Greek. And they helped him understand kecharitomeni in this idiomatic way. They used an idiom which is the same idiom that the Syriac translators did, because they also understood that the Greeks did it. Now that doesn't mean there's error. And when you look at the Marian doctrines, they don't use that idiomatic as the sole basis for any doctrine. And so, and the church, as a matter of fact, after Trent, there was already before Trent it was going on, making sure that we had the best quality of the Vulgate possible. And furthermore, that scholars still today use the Vulgate to see what did we have in the 4th century manuscript of the Greek text that St. Jerome was using. So it's still consulted quite scholarly. So I wouldn't say that the Vulgate's errors, I wouldn't call that an error. It's an idiomatic translation, but not a wrong one. Now, we might translate it in a more literal way into English rather than idiomatic way. But believe me, when you go through translations today, we also use idiomatic because the literal one is often too odd sounding. You know, so you always are using idioms. But it is important to also go back to the Greek, and in fact, that was also going on in the 16th century as more Greek manuscripts became available. And it's not that the church rejected the Greek manuscripts, but they would use that as part of the discussion, but the official formula in the doctrines would always come from the Vulgate. And I say it's too much to say that it's an error, but it'd be problematic. But that'd be a good discussion in a translation class, and I'd be happy to engage that. We had another question. Ma'am, where are you from?
Atlanta, Georgia.
Good, you're part of this big group here.
St. Monica Church.
Great, which church?
St. Monica.
St. Monica, great to have you. And your question?
And I think it's important for us to try to find ways in order that we can protect our Christian values.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's important that families and parents start with children to teach them the right values, love, and show that in the way they live and practices. And I think it is very difficult because we see so much on television for us to realize, you know, how important it is to us to live our life that way. Like you said, faith is number one, love and family values. And it's important for us because it's so, everybody's against it and you hear so many negative things about it. Sure. But it's, when you see people that go to church, they're so happy and loving, and I think that's what it's about.
But here, one of the things that will be important for us today is that we have to help one another think through the values that permeate the culture. The culture gives all these values off. And we just say, oh, well, that's different. I've heard any number of people, oh, that's different. Yes, it's different from what? From what's good? Then reject it. If it's different from what we used to do, well, still, is it true or false? Being different is not a very meaningful statement. It has to, what we want to know is it true and good? Or is it false and evil? Now, you say that in the modern world, oh, you're so judgmental. Well, yes, because I don't want to be a thorough idiot. You know, I'm idiotic enough. I just want to be thorough at it, and I try to think through some of the things that are good, some that are bad. And this is where we have to work with our young people, knowing what they're listening to and watching, and then engaging them in a discussion so they don't just go, oh, Mom, you know, but really they say, well, tell me about it. What's going on? You tell me. Explain it, Lucy. Tell me what's going on here. And that would be a good thing. But yeah, we have to really, we can't, in the past, when I was a kid growing up, there were eyes of moms all over the neighborhood who knew what we were up to and called, hey, Lorraine, your kid's doing this. And then I was in trouble. You know, you were busted. You were busted. And so today you don't, well, you know, I can't say anything because that's not my kid. My mom gave him plenty of permission to say stuff. All right. I have another email from Ryan in Springfield, Massachusetts. Hello, Father Pacwa. I'm a Baptist who lives in a predominantly Catholic town. I've been to Springfield. Nice town. I have been to both Protestant and Catholic churches and have observed how these churches engage their youth. Many of my friends are Catholic, and they don't seem to have a strong faith, as opposed to many of my Protestant friends who are involved in youth groups and are reading the Bible daily. What is the Catholic Church doing to help engage young people, and what could be done in the Catholic Church to make it more appealing to young people and to help them be excited about their faith? Ryan, great question. And, thank you for your concern for our youth. This is something that is a big issue. One of the problems, Ryan, that goes back to 1968, probably before you were born, it'll be very important that a lot of people that taught Catholic faith to young people came to believe that it didn't matter what they believed, just so long as they were nice to each other. And there was a sort of a blinking, instead of staring down the culture. A lot of Catholic catechists blinked in the face of the Cultural Revolution of the late 60s and into the 70s and 80s. Instead of saying, no, we're going to think through this on the basis of Catholic morality. Again, a lot of folks inside the church were saying, well, that's the institution and the establishment, and we can't go along with that. It's not a matter of just going along with the institution to keep your job. Is it true or not? And instead of helping young people to think through and grapple with those things, we went to other stuff and taught nonsense. When I started teaching high school, that's sort of the way I was expected to teach, and that's what I started doing. And I could see after one semester, this is absurd. I made a lot of mistakes my first semester, and I completely reoriented my course the second semester and the other semesters I taught, because I could see this avoidance of teaching the faith and calling people to know Jesus and understand him and understand the gospel as well as commit yourself to him. That is dumber than a box of rocks. And so, I totally changed my whole approach after one semester of failing. I regret it took me that long. But this is something that we have to have our own selves clearly committed to calling people to salvation in Jesus Christ, forgiveness of sins through his saving death and glorious resurrection, the promise of eternal life, so that we're not calling people to be nice folks, but to be saints. And that's one of the things that's missing, and I think that is one of the ways I would urge catechists. Now, what I see is that a number of young folks who've come up through that mess reject it and say, that was dumb. I'm going to come in there. I'm going to teach the faith. And they're on fire. They're on fire, doing great stuff. And, so maybe the problem is the folks over 30, my generation. Sir, where are you from?